So there's a New York Times piece that literally just came out right now, and it reveals some inside information about Barack Obama's role in the end of this primary and some of his role in the primary in general. Now, we were already aware of his sort of his role in the primary, but this goes into a tiny bit more detail, and it also explains that basically Obama is really the one who convinced Bernie Sanders to drop out. Now, it explains here saying, but with calibrated stealth, Mr. Obama has been considerably more engaged in the campaign's denouement than has been previously revealed, and for months he kept in close contact with senior party officials in hopes of preventing a repeat of the protracted and nasty 2016 primary race. Then, in the weeks after it became clear that Mr. Biden was the party's near certain nominee, Mr. Obama, telling a friend he needed to, quote, accelerate the endgame, had at least 4 long conversations with his former vice president's remaining rival, Senator Bernie Sanders. Mr. Obama's efforts to ease the senator out of the race played a significant role in his decision to end his bid and on Monday endorse Mr. Biden, according to people close to the Vermont Independent. So this is revealing that basically we had already known, I'd already reported to you guys probably already seen, that Obama and Bernie had, some conversations, some private phone calls. And as I also showed you guys from a clip of Bernie's before, he's actually spoken to Obama throughout this campaign. So there's some really weird relationship stuff going on here in this race. Now, it also, in this piece, it also alludes to some like beef between Biden and Obama, which is actually kind of interesting. So very interesting. But it also, it also goes on to sort of talk about some other pretty interesting things. One of the things that it looks like is they are going to come out. Obama's going to come out and endorse Joe Biden. Now, continuing on in this piece, it explains that he actually had some interesting reactions. He says he had intended to engage publicly only after the convention, now scheduled for August at the earliest, in line with his fall barnstorming campaign on behalf of Mrs. Clinton in 2016 and congressional candidates in 2018. He resisted calls by some Democratic officials earlier this year to intervene on Mr. Biden's behalf in the wake of Mr. Sanders' victory in the Nevada caucuses, arguing that he did not want to, quote, thumb the scale for his friend, even though that's kind of what you did, Barack. That's what I don't like about Barack's involvement. He's kind of like a king, on the backside. He's basically the king of the Democratic Party. And so it's like, these aren't really fair elections. But here's an interesting piece. It says, nonetheless, he was becoming more agitated by the state of the race as Mr. Sanders surged and Mr. Biden slumped. By late February, he was telling people in his orbit that he thought Mr. Biden's campaign had an alarming lack of infrastructure and shared his doubts about Mr. Biden's belief that he could win the nomination after losing Iowa and New Hampshire. Democratic officials say Mr. Obama had no direct role in the campaign shakeup. Obviously, they're going to say that. That happened soon after. But people with knowledge of the situation say he made it clear that he supported Mr. Biden's moves, naming as his campaign manager Jennifer O'Malley Dillon, a former Obama campaign field organizing specialist, and moving another Obama veteran, the former White House Communications Director Anita Dunn. By the way, she's the one who gave out pro bono legal advice to Harvey Weinstein, into a more powerful role. And if you really believe that he had no role in this or no role whatsoever, you're definitely naive as hell. Also says Mr. Obama did not directly encourage Mr. Sanders' rivals to endorse Biden ahead of the decisive Super Tuesday primaries, but he did tell Buttigieg, a moderate, that he would never have more leverage than on the day that he was quitting the race. And the former South Bend mayor soon joined the avalanche of former candidates backing Mr. Biden. Sanders, who in 2016 accused the Democratic establishment of conspiring to support Mrs. Clinton, took notes of all these moves, but he has made no such charges against Obama. This is the really weird stuff to me. Very, very odd stuff. All right? It says, in fact, one of his campaign managers, speaking on the condition of anonymity, said the senator was grateful for Obama's neutrality throughout the campaign. Sanders, who has denied reports that he contemplated a primary challenge to Obama in 2012, had made a point of reaching out to the president several times in recent months to update him on the progress of his campaign. I don't know. It feels kind of like talking to a spy, if you ask me, is what it seems like to me. Um, and it's really, really, really interesting how they had this sort of this relationship throughout this time now. Bernie and Obama's relationship has been weird from the jump. As you guys know, in 2006, there's that video of Obama endorsing Bernie Sanders for his run for the Senate. And then when he became president, they beefed a bit because Bernie didn't like how Obama was being this kind of conservative Republican rather than a progressive. He fought their attempts to basically cut Social Security. So it's been a very rocky relationship, no doubt. So, definitely some really interesting stuff. It says, in the end, Sanders concluded that negotiating a détente for the former president would ease the blow of his withdrawal in his base. Whether Obama's involvement will ultimately draw Sanders voters to support Mr. Biden's candidacy remains an open question, and the answer to that question is no. It says in late March, Obama reached out to Sanders. The two men would talk at least 3 more times with the former president, reassuring Sanders that he had already accomplished much of what he had set out to do, moving the party and Mr. Biden substantially to the left, according to 2 people with knowledge of their interactions. That's obviously not true, obviously. But the people said he mostly listened to Sanders, who was in a reflective mood, speaking candidly about his post-campaign plans and feelings about the race, the kind of conversation the 2 men had never had before. So, as if Sanders, for his part, is intent on protecting his open line of communication with the former president. When asked for a readout during an interview on MSNBC shortly after dropping out, he said, "They're private conversations," waving a "don't even ask me about it" hand on camera. The interviewer, Chris Hayes, plowed ahead. "Well, can I ask you about your conversation with Vice President Biden?" He says, "Oh, yes." So, really weird relationship between these two guys, but the sort of leniency and the sort of, I guess, not judging Obama the same way. Like, Obama was behind the scenes sort of setting all this stuff up, getting endorsements for Biden, giving this advice, and I'm sure he was doing more than it's reported here. I mean, if you're talking about getting the word directly from his campaign staffers, oh yeah, he totally didn't orchestrate this on his own. It's pretty hilarious, but also the fact that Joe Biden won without any sort of infrastructure, I think really says a lot about him and his win. It doesn't really make sense to me still, and I think it's a stunning indictment on the electorate. I mean, the guy didn't even campaign, he didn't go to Super Tuesday states. He didn't have, campaign offices, and so it's like, wait a second, how's he going to win this? And it's like, what is going on? How do you win an election that you don't campaign in? Nobody sees you anywhere. You're not actively campaigning. Bernie Sanders campaigned his ass off. Joe Biden didn't do anything. So it's still really weird to me on that front. I guess the default support kicked in with a lot of dumb voters. Now, Obama seems to be under this weird notion that his endorsement means literally anything in the general election. Not only does Obama's endorsement mean nothing, it's actually going to make the Democrat lose. If Obama's endorsement meant something, Hillary would have won in 2016. But nobody but Democrats care about his endorsement. Obama can be the king of Democrats, and that's what he is. They've anointed him king. He's the god of Democrats. But it means nothing when it comes to the general. Nobody cares about Barack Obama. All right, nobody cares, especially because he's decided to sort of, just completely surround himself, and what he had already done with all these corporate Democrats. He surrounded himself by people like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. So why would people care about, that? I don't understand. So I don't know if he's under this delusion that he's going to be able to help Biden win. You mean nothing, Obama. Like, he needs, I don't know if he's in one of those, I guess very wealthy and famous people get into these cocoons. But someone's got to give him a reality check. Like, yo, bro, your endorsement doesn't mean jack shit. If it did, Hillary would have won. But she got smacked. So, interesting stuff. The relationship between Bernie and Obama, really a weird one. It looks like Bernie doesn't have any sort of animosity towards Obama. He sort of used him as like a therapist type of situation to get out his feelings. And then I guess Obama, mostly what it looks like to be a lot, just by allowing him to speak, basically got Bernie to drop out, because a lot of us were surprised by how early he dropped out. I knew he was going to drop out at some point. I didn't know he was going to drop out that fast, though. We didn't even get Wisconsin results or anything like that. So, and I told you guys, it's tough to stay in the race when you don't have any wins. Back in 2016, it was a much different race, because the second half of the primaries were actually really beneficial for us, and we're picking up wins left and right. Michigan, Wisconsin, Alaska, Hawaii, all these states, Washington, blowout, all these states. Um, Not so much this time, but I really want to know what happened in those phone calls. And hopefully Bernie spills the beans and all that stuff eventually before he dies. I would love to hear it, but Obama kind of sets up all these elections. And so I think Barack Obama is sort of I think he's a big roadblock to a lot of progressivism and progressive change in the party, which is pretty sad, but I don't know how you can change that. He's sort of the god in the Democratic Party. But I hope once Biden loses, he realizes that he has no sway over anybody or anything except for Democrats and Democratic politicians, because he seems to be under this delusion that he matters in a general election when he doesn't.